Drilling fluids touch just about everything in the drilling process. We're here to deconstruct the drilling process and drilling fluid concepts to provide a deeper understanding of our industry. In each episode, we'll share information, talk to interesting people, and maybe share a few stories along the way. Welcome to the Flowline, a production of AES Drilling Fluids, brought to you by Matt Offenbacher and Justin Gauthier.
And we're back. Welcome, everyone. If you're tuning in to the second episode of Water-Based Mud Contaminants, do yourself it actually, one doesn't really run into the other, so you can listen to, second episode, then go back to the first. But if you're tuning in or if you've randomly just stumbled upon the show, we are today going to run through the contaminants when it comes to water-based mud, how to treat it. And if you look at the library of episodes, the one before this, we ran through CO2 contamination, bicarbonates, carbonates, H2S, and acid gases, things of that nature. And so it made sense to break it up because we spent 20 minutes talking about some extremely exciting stuff, and we didn't want to blow your socks off all in one episode. So we figured blow one sock off and then the other sock off.
Right. Well, we're afraid. I mean, people are driving,
Exactly.
Keep them on the road.
Yeah, exactly. So, but anyway, let's go ahead and get started, Matt. Talking about water-based mud and contaminants and how to treat. The other two aren't as common as the one we're going to talk about next, because in every single well, you're always going to run casing. And when you run casing, you typically have cement, hopefully. And then when you go to drill out, you have to deal with this stuff. And so, Matt, let's talk about cement contamination.
Yes. Well, cement is an interesting one just because it's there, right? I mean, now granted, it could be if it's hardened, it doesn't matter, right? But green cement, you're going to get a nice shot of very high pH and a lot of calcium, and so this typically can create higher viscosity, higher gels. It's going to be a relatively hot pH where it could start tearing up even polymers and that sort of thing. You'll get cross-linking. It's a lot of times when you get this contamination, especially when you first start to see it, it's a goo, a gooey mess. You'll see your alkalinities will go up. So like your PM, which is your alkalinity of your whole mud, should go up with your pH and PF, but so
it's pretty obvious.
You know it when you see it, I think. Just you're drilling out cement and it comes back nasty.
Right.
Probably cement contamination.
Well, let me ask you this, and I know the answer, but for the audience, if you're just going to drill out with straight water, you're not going to see a lot of that, would you? I mean, the only reason you have that sort of viscosity hump and everything kind of go, I mean, you're going to see it in your alkalinities, obviously, with your water, but if you're just drilling out with straight water, you typically wouldn't have a bunch of issues that you're going to then all of a sudden have to treat besides your alkalinities, right?
Yeah, that's very much the case. And so one of the things that, especially when we do like reservoir drilling fluids, which were very like sensitive and designed in a particular way, we would like beg, can you like bump the plug with water and drill out with seawater and displace or, whatever.
Yeah.
Use an alternative fluid, drill out, and then let's move to our clean, fancy stuff. So I don't have to deal with any of this.
Right. Yeah.
And it was sometimes an option. It was worth bringing up.
Yes.
Because when you start getting polymers into the mix, when you start having clays in there, they're not going to play nice with this stuff, and that's where you start to have your problems.
Got it. Okay, so coming from the angle of assuming you're drilling out with mud, with different properties and different products in there, what are some of the treatment methods that one can consider? One thing you can do is you can start by treating with citric and bicarb. You can pre-treat your system, right? And that is one way. So the citric acid will tie up the calcium. The bicarb will will provide a buffer as well. But you can sort of pre-treat and see how you're doing there. I don't see that as like, granted, it's not like citric acid is ungettable. It's just gotten expensive, and so I feel like people are just like, whatever. Yeah.
That being said, you're probably going to have to do something about this elevated viscosity and that kind of thing. So, a lot of times you might use your bicarb to lower lower pH. Sorry, I'm getting fuzzy here. SAP is another one. So sodium acid pyrophosphate. So phosphates will tie up calcium, and it's acidic. You might need to throw a thinner in there because things got thick. So from there, you're trying to recover properties, and I guess the way I'd characterize that is, if you already have the gooey mess that you're trying to recover from, some of that mud is probably trash.
I was gonna say, yeah, at that point it's worth just dumping.
Yes, and there's a lot of situations where, even when you've done some pre-treatment or whatever, you're probably looking to divert a bunch of junk at that point, and so you're waiting for something to come back that isn't garbage, as long as you're not pumping the whole system away, if that's an option to you. So treat what you can, as far as what you believe is recoverable, but then you're probably going to have to do some things to beef up your properties. But there's a good chance you cross-linked and locked up a bunch of stuff that is just junk at this point. It's not worth trying to recover it.
Right.
And so I guess that's the other nuance to this. But this is pretty basic, common stuff because we know it's coming. We sort of know what our typical book of additives is. I used to always citric and bicarb. I would pre-treat it. You wouldn't see that much, but there was some crap you'd dump away and you'd move on with your life. Yeah. But did you have a preferred treatment?
So back when we used to program a lot of stuff in Canada, we use a lot of sulfamic acid.
That's right.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's a cheaper option than citric. It's been a long time since I've even looked at a mud program from Canada, but north of the border, that's a typical one. And then to get rid of, so that would be for the pH, and then the calcium, I think we'd use soda ash. So that was a pretty typical combination. And then down here, the sodium bicarb seems to be the one that everyone loves to use. So, sometimes too, if depending on what kind of properties you're trying to maintain, which if you're drilling out the chute, it's not like ultra critical, but a lot of times you might just have to increase your dilution and just kind of like get things watered down.
Yeah.
Instead of like trying to treat a crazy mess. And if you're fast holing, drilling fast, then you can afford to ramp up your dilution. So sometimes you just build more volume, and that kind of helps in combination with treatment and getting everything sort of leveled out. And then you can start, whenever it's time to mud up, then hopefully all that cement's treated out.
But dilution is the solution.
Yeah, oftentimes, especially in water-based mud. I mean, it's you can't reiterate that enough sometimes, and folks tend to get a little shy with it for some reason if you're inexperienced, but a lot of times you see a seasoned vet and they just have things wide open. It's like, whoa, that's a lot, and come to find out it actually was the right way to go about it. But nonetheless, pretty common. You deal with it all the time. Treatments are pretty standard. Any mud program is going to have basically the same type of treatment. So anyway, moving on to one that's not as common, depending on the basin or the wells you're drilling in different regions. Some areas have a lot of anhydrite and some don't have any. But if you're drilling with water-based mud and there is an anhydrite stringer or maybe a formation that you're drilling through, you definitely need to be prepared for that one.
Yes, and here we get back to the whole, I see calcium, because that's what that stuff is made of, and then we see some flocculation effects, right? So now I've got an increase in viscosity, probably increase in gels, fluid loss. This, anhydrite in particular, or gyp, I mean, you might see a lower pH, because it's soluble, a lower PF, but really you're trying to address that viscosity increase and deal with this calcium. So, you could use something like a phosphate or more commonly a soda ash or something to try and tie up the calcium. And then use a thinner with some caustic. But that's one way to go about it if it's a moderate encounter. Mm-hmm. However, I mean, there are times if you drill through a bunch of these stringers, or you get through, you take a big bite of one, it may be that you're like, there's not enough soda ash in this world that is going to get this system back in shape.
Yeah.
And that's where you got to look for, like, maybe I break it out over.
Right.
And once again, this depends. Is it am I a clay-based? Am I a polymer-based? What kind of system am I running? It's harder to get a little more specific.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say that for the most part, if you try and break over to a JIP mud system, what is scary, and one of our guys has a fair amount of experience with this, and just talking to him about it, he's like, you get this big viscosity hump. So you keep adding. The fluid gets thicker and thicker, and you're like, I can't do this any longer.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it breaks over and it looks smooth and, looks like what you were expecting or hoping for.
Yeah.
But he very much was he's like, if you have not seen it before, it is one of the scariest things you can do in a rig, because you think you're like locking up the whole system.
Yeah.
And like, you're halfway wondering if I need to pack, do I need to pack my bags right now, because this does not look good.
Right.
So I think that's another one where I think pilot testing can be very helpful to help build your confidence.
Yeah.
And say, okay, yeah, it's getting thick, but if I keep hammering it,
yeah,
this is where I get.
And if you have time, which again, there's never enough time, but like if you do some pilot testing, maybe just go show the on-site rep and say, hey, look, we're going to see some crazy viscosities. Don't be alarmed here. I'd come watch this pilot test real quick, because what you see in this cup is going to happen on the rig. It's just you're aware, at least maybe for the first time.
Yes.
And again, that's an ideal situation. I'm sure the company reps will be like, yeah, whatever, just don't screw anything up.
Yes.
But if you've got someone who's interested and you're willing to take the time, or they're willing to take the time to kind of watch the pilot testing, oftentimes you can eliminate some heartache from those instead of them seeing it for the first time as you're drilling. Because then, like you said, it can be alarming. Like, everyone, you're calling out viscosities, and next thing you know, you're calling out numbers that everyone on the location's like, what in the world is going on with the mud? And then, you're having to answer 21 questions. And so it can be frustrating. But from an operations side of the coin, that's where a lot of times, and depending on how high up the anhydrite is, and on land, typically it's pretty shallow. A lot of times you don't need properties before that, so you may just drill it with water again, and then they'll break over, or you'll mud up, as they say, after you drill the anhydrate. But depending on where you're at, sometimes you may see a deeper anhydrate stringer, so you're already mudded up. So depending on where you're at, sort of in the well, or where it comes in, it might not be a big deal if you're, say, just drilling with like a flock water, or like just a clear water to get ROP until you need to mud up. So there's kind of some things to consider too, depending on where you're at in the well.
Yes, well, and I think the other thing, we lean on some of these best practices, and they are helpful, but they're in the context of when they were written too.
Yeah.
And so I just think sometimes we drill through these things so fast, we, what used to be 5 days of drilling is 5 hours.
Yeah,
and so, like, you're not fighting this stuff the same way you used to be. You're not washing it out, and there's just a number of other things. But the other part of it is, like, normally we also know what sort of additives we need. And so a lot of times we can get away with just using something that isn't going to respond as much to this, because we know it's there.
Yeah.
A lot of this is, okay, we expect to drill a ton of this, and guess what? That means we can be prepared in advance, get into the program, and not be like, shucks, what do we do?
Yeah.
So I think that, but for the most part, I would expect, if you do encounter this starts screwing up your mud, most of the situations we encounter, and we are but a small drilling fluids company on, working in a small part of the world, or, I mean, the U.S. is big, but like, we're not everywhere. Our general experience is you can probably treat a lot of the calcium with soda ash, you can thin it out, and you can keep it under control. Yeah. We don't drill a lot of, 3,000-foot anhydrite beds.
Right.
That just make everything a nightmare.
Right.
So
we're speaking strictly from a sort of U.S. land perspective.
Yes.
And with that said, we'll move on to what we're very familiar with this, especially out in West Texas, and actually a lot more common in more places, is saltwater flow.
Yeah, and saltwater flows. I remember in East Texas when I was working there, you would take a saltwater flow, but it was actually you were drilling into sort of like a pressurized subsurface seawater pocket, if you will. Most of the saltwater flows that we talk about today are from produced water cross flow from your nearby injector well that has pressurized everything around you.
Yeah.
And I mean, so usually it looks a little different than old school seawater per se. It normally, but either way, you're going to see your chlorides change relative to what you were, unless they happen to match the seawater down hole or whatever's coming in, which isn't likely.
No.
But depending on where you started with your chlorides, it'll either go up or go down. pH may drop. A lot of these, wherever it's coming from, salt water is going to have some calcium, magnesium. You may see some hardness. Although I feel like there's a lot of those conversations where it's like, oh yeah, you'll pick up some hardness, and they're like, and maybe you'll see an increase in viscosity, and it's like, well, I'm diluting the system. Most of the time, I take in so much water that, like, yes, I might see some calcium, but my big problem is all my products that I was using to make a mud are 30% of what they were.
Yeah.
And so, you might see a fluid loss increase, but it's more dilution effects than, flocculation or something that's causing it.
Sure.
Putting my Permian hat on saltwater flows, and granted, I'm hearing, when we talk to our, folks in the Bakken, they're like, yeah, we see it a lot more now.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we didn't, and now we do.
Yeah.
But the first thing we would love to do if the formation can support it is wait up.
Right.
Would love to. What we continue to see, though, is that you want to kill that thing, but you might not have the mud weight to do it before you go on losses further down the hole, which is a neat thing to have flowing water above you and losses further down. Anyways.
Yeah.
It's not. Don't do it.
Right.
Not recommended if it can be avoided.
Sure.
But I guess otherwise, like, if you could kill it, try. Treat your hardness. Try and come to terms with what you're going to do about it, because I think sometimes it's like, all right, well, guess what? Now we're drilling with brine. Other times it's, no, let's kill this thing and keep our mud system, or, we got to figure out what our options are.
Yeah. No, and that's the thing too, is once you get through this stuff, or if you've managed to kill it, or if you're just going to accept that it's going to flow on you while you drill, understanding more so what the products are that you can use that actually will yield any results.
Yeah.
Because if you're, in your mind, you're going to, okay, we're going to drill the freshwater mud, and I'm going to use this, and this product. Well, next thing you know, when you introduce a lot of the chlorides and salt, a lot of the stuff won't yield. So, if you have like a high, say, just a bentonite system, that's going to throw things off. So you may have to sort of tweak your product, the products that you plan on using, especially for fluid loss, viscosity, really the main ones there. So, the treatment side of it, it's not like you can just add a product and then the salt water goes away. You kind of have to adjust your approach moving forward, and then while treating, obviously, a few things. But
yes, yeah.
But anyway, yeah. When in doubt, see if you can kill the well. If you can't, then move on to what we've been talking about. Next, last but not least, and one that we deal with every single day, as long as you're drilling, you're going to be dealing with this. That is solids contamination. And it's kind of interesting when you throw in the contamination bucket, because the contamination, we think, oh, you've drilled into something and now are contaminated. But the reality is your drilling fluids is always being contaminated by solids. And so, if it can get too high, it can get kind of, dicey, but there's always a way to treat it. So, Matt, why don't we talk about what you're going to see if your solids start going up too high?
Well, with fine solids, they'll start to want to agglomerate. So in a polymeric mud, or, you might see some gelation. You'll see an increase in your fluid loss. The most obvious one, if you're checking your retort, is your retort solids will go up.
Yeah.
And, I think with water-based mud, solids contamination is definitely a thing, especially when we're trying to be conservative off, like, the, near surface or whatever. But the challenge, of course, is the only solution to solids is dilution. You can obviously check if your solids control equipment is in shape. You may, there may be flocculant treatments that can help you. There may be other solids control equipment you can run. But big picture, some of that's going to depend on the mud system you're running, how many solids it can tolerate. Are you a low solid system versus something where I disperse it and those charges aren't affecting me as much. But I think even sometimes you'll see it from just like mud dehydration, and you're sort of losing liquid and gaining solids. There's a lot of ways to deal with solids where they come up, like where they're not at that acceptable range, if you will, where you're like, I got to do something about this beyond sort of my standard dilution schedule. But, the best savings from a cost perspective are have good solids control equipment to minimize what you have to do.
Right.
So,
no, that's good solids control equipment is just always critical and more necessary, especially at the rates we're drilling nowadays. But one other thing too is if obviously a lot of that stuff will show up on a mud check, but depending on what you're doing at the rig, it may be a few hours between mud checks. But the biggest telltale sign is if your viscosity starts moving in a direction going up, or even if it gets really bad, your mud weight might start creeping up randomly.
Yeah.
You're like, well, why is my mud weight climbing a tenth every hour? There's a good chance that you're getting a solids accumulation. It's not coming from barite. So that's one to just kind of keep in mind, is if your viscosity and your mud weight, when they're calling it out hopefully every 15 minutes, doesn't change, then at least that there isn't a big solids problem. Now, you may run a mud check and notice your low gravs came up a little bit and say, oh, okay, well, I just hasn't seen my weight and viscosity yet. But if all of a sudden your viscosity and your weight start climbing, there's some contamination happening. So be aware.
yes, and I have encountered that very instance where I'm like, hey, what's going on? And the part that wasn't communicated to me that was communicated to the derrick hand is that the drilling consultant had decided that we were going to weight up with solids, which
that's a good old-fashioned way of shortcutting.
A very expensive shortcut. And not only that, I think he started pumping from the reserve pit to help weight up with solids. So yeah, I think that sometimes those things where it's like, oh yeah, so sometimes the solids can be a lot worse because of decisions that we make.
Yeah.
But I think those are kind of the gist of the, we kind of want to go sort of on your typical contamination and treatment table, what you might see, and just maybe give you something to think about. I'm sure there's more that we haven't covered, but I guess those are the usual suspects.
Yeah. And if you want us to elaborate, or if you have any other contaminants that maybe you've encountered that we didn't talk about, you can hit us up on LinkedIn. Matt and I are both on there. Or you can reach us at the Flowline podcast at aesfluids.com. And if you have a question that it has nothing to do with contaminants, but just a drilling fluids question, maybe a drilling operations question, we love answering questions from guests, or from listeners, sorry. And so, please, some of the best episodes we have are from just good questions from folks like yourself that are boots on the ground dealing with this stuff day in, day out, which obviously we are too, but we're not in the field. And so oftentimes there's just things happen in the field that, we may not cover here in the office. And if you got anything that's happened on your rig, let us know. And with that being said, folks, check us out. The LinkedIn page for AES is great. Check out the YouTube channel. And if you could, share this with someone. That would be super helpful for us. And until next time, cheers.
Take care.
Thanks for listening. Please tune in next week for another exciting episode of The Flowline. And remember, may your returns always be full and your trips always smooth. Views expressed in this program belong to participants and not their employees. The program is for informational purposes only and cannot take the place of seeking professional advice. Copyright AES Drilling Fluids.